Okay, most people retire without knowing just how precarious this can be. Every retiree enters a period which is called the fragile decade, where basically they are completely subject to returns leading up and during the first few years of retirement. But can you think of the problem here? Well, look, you've got absolutely no control on what global markets are going to do in that period. And during this time, you're probably going to have the most money you've ever had and need to start drawing on it. Well, look, thankfully, there is a way that we can manage all of this uncertainty, and that is where these 3 pension hacks come in. So this video has been inspired by one of the most prominent figures in retirement planning, Dr. Wade Pfau, and by the end of it, I'm going to reveal the strategies that professionals use to make sure that you have enough money in retirement. And look, if you're not in a position where you've got a high amount of guaranteed income and you're relying on a fund, that you don't run out of money. And also, by the way, despite Wade being incredibly well esteemed and academic, there are actually 2 of the hacks of the 4 he put forward that I didn't think were good enough. So I'm going to explain why I didn't like them later on. Sorry, Wade. Anyway, more on that later. So hack 1 is buffer assets. So buffer assets effectively are assets that you hold away from the portfolio you're going to be drawing down on, specifically at the point when you come to retire. The downside clearly of buffer assets is that you don't get the growth on these assets, as they're normally in cash, sometimes short-term bonds. So the return is lost, and you need to make sure as part of the plan there's actually enough assets overall to be able to utilize buffer assets. And the simple idea of having a buffer is it just avoids you selling at a loss within the portfolio. So the idea is that you have 18 months or 2 years of income in cash or cash-like short-dated bonds. And the thing that I like about buffer assets is, yeah, look, I acknowledge you don't get a return, and I acknowledge that they do cause a drag on the portfolio, but I also do think as someone who wants to make sure their clients have a great retirement, there is such freedom in being able to say, okay, look, we'll keep on track of things, but as you make this leap into retirement, we've planned for the first 2 years or so of runway, and we're going to monitor and adapt as we go, but you've got this freedom so that you don't just retire and think, oh no, what a terrible time to retire. And in doing this, what you're able to deliver here is reducing that sequence of return impact. And the reason why that's so important is because the sequence of the return risk is the highest when you're just about to draw down on probably your largest bit of your pot. And the benefit of having a buffer is that you don't have to draw down those assets if it's not favorable in the markets to do so. And while no one can predict the future, if we take the research from Vanguard, you can see from 1945, the average bear market in the UK was about 1 year and 1 month. So while clearly we can't predict the future, it gives us a pretty good guide about how much income we might need if we fall into a bear market. Okay, hack number 2, adaptive spending. So I've did a full video on adaptive spending, but effectively how it works is that you use rules within a drawdown portfolio to make sure that you manage your money across retirement and adapt your spending as you go. So watch that other video if you want more detail. But the reason why I quite like thinking about this is because, why do we obsess over this figure in our heads of spending in retirement? As if you're on the top of a mountain saying, I will now forevermore spend £35,000 per year each year for the rest of my life. When in reality, we don't really know anything apart from broad parameters on how the spending is going to develop over our lives. So why not in retirement? And this is where spending flexibility comes in. And I can talk about this in a fancy technical way, talking about things like Guyton, inflation adjusted rates and all the rest of it. But very simply, for the sanity of everyone watching, it just means that we have a framework to adapt as we go. And there is a really good level of research in making this work and it being effective. So how you do this properly is you can either build it around, say, for example, the 4% rule with some adaptations depending on your needs and your goals, or you work out the required return to meet your expenditure goals, and then let's add some adaptive rules to it. And the guardrails, so that if your portfolio decreases by a certain amount, you adapt your expenditure. And actually in this video, worth a watch, I ran a portfolio where I imagined you retired in the tech bubble, and that led then into the Great Depression, like terrible market crashes. Believe it or not, within that framework, you can make sure you don't run out of money. The problem with this hack is that actually the expenditure, if you consider all these adjustments, if you get a really bad run, can be very low. So you can actually have an adaptive spending framework that works, but it drops your expenditure down way lower than you'd like. And this is where hack 3 is about to come in. But before I do that, please do consider subscribing. I've got a ton of videos on pension planning and I'd love to have you on the journey. So you know that concept that I was mentioning that Wade put forward that I scrapped because I didn't like it? So let's go with the hacks we abandoned. 1, that Wade put forward, spend less. Yeah, literally, you can wonder why my audience, I didn't really fancy just saying, hey guys, why don't you just spend less? Come on, Wade. Anyway, the point you mentioned was actually a very good one. And I'm being really flippant about this. His point was that you can be more conservative with your portfolio. And if you did that, you've got a better chance of the money running out. Obviously a good idea, but I don't know, I thought it was a bit obvious. Anyway, the second hack that Wade put forward I thought was interesting and I wanted to discuss, though I didn't want to support it. It's to reduce investment volatility when it matters most, when sequence risk is the highest. Okay, so this is legitimate retirement planning technique called the bond tent or equity glide path, where some would remove equity volatility from the portfolio by moving into bonds when sequence risk is the highest. Anyway, I'm oversimplifying this and I'm not really being fair here. For it to be done well, you need to do asset liability matching, which needs a very bespoke portfolio. But the reason why I'm really not a fan is that for many portfolios, it won't let you cater the duration well. And for example, if you did that in 2022, when inflation ran rampant and it wiped out literally 10 years of returns on some bond portfolios, how's that going to work out for you? And it just goes to show how easy it is to mess up a strategy like this and get it wrong if you don't quite get the tactics right. But in all seriousness, unless you move into short-dated bonds as part of that strategy, I think that strategy really does stink of works really well in the back-tested portfolio, but is a nightmare in reality. Difficult, complex to achieve the right outcomes. I'm not a fan. Okay, hack 3, and there are some advisors that are not going to like this, but I don't care. Partial annuity. Now, there are some who really are dead set against using any form of annuity strategically in a portfolio for retirement planning. And to be honest, I think that there is a place for them, especially now that rates are slightly higher, and there could be a compelling argument for using it as part of a retirement plan. And I say this as someone who really does believe that investing generally in equities is a fantastic way to build wealth. But I also acknowledge that everyone's tolerances of risk differ. And I also know from experience the perception of what risk is changes quite a bit when you stop work. The ideal balance I think we can probably all agree on is that you've got enough money so you can sleep at night, the security, but flexibility so you can do the things you want to do, and also take into account that your years of higher spending are probably going to be at the start of retirement when you are fit and healthy. So the UK research on annuity and equities is quite sparse, but good old Wade, he has done a paper before, which is a bit of a mouthful, called A Broad Framework for Determining an Efficient Frontier of Retirement Income. Right, that's really nerdy retirement speak for, can we use a mixture of retirement options to achieve an ideal mix of certainty and flexibility? And I have to stress, this is US research and not necessarily as applicable to the UK. But actually, it indicates that a strong mixture of stocks and annuities may make more sense than stocks and bonds. Alright, hear me out. Look, let's say you've got a 60-year-old. Well, at time of recording, current annuity rates for a single person with a 3% increasing annuity with no guarantees is about 4.93%, meaning a 60-year-old could buy £4,933 of guaranteed income with 100 grand. Hardly anything to write home about. But it's important to say the average life expectancy of that individual is 84, but with a 25% chance they'll hit 92. Now remember, for retirement planning, we are dealing with real humans who are impacted by market movements, and they might not want to adapt their spending down that much. If they have a decent sized pot, especially in line with what I said about hack 2 and adaptive spending, there's a strong argument for maybe a safety first approach securing essential needs and then saying, well look, the rest of the pot's to be drawn down upon. If the markets perform well, you'll have a brilliant retirement, but if not, we've got a baseline to work from. And if you think about what annuities do that investable assets don't, they provide a level of income which is paid for the rest of your life, regardless of the performance of the markets. So that longevity risk that I mentioned, the risk of running out of money, is reduced more. They can also offset the sequence risk as they're not affected by the order of returns. Once you purchase the annuity, that's it. So just to bring it all together, look, these hacks, when properly used as part of retirement planning, can be really effective. But look, if you haven't got on top of this yet, and rest assured, it's not just you, you might be perhaps thinking, look George, I'm not even sure where to start with all this pension planning. Well look, there are 3 big retirement mistakes I see from people all the time. If you watch this video, it will tell you how to avoid them so you don't lose out. But thanks for watching.